Zane Fletcher's hands were shaking again. Not the subtle, almost imperceptible tremor of fatigue or nerves, but a rhythmic, jittery vibration that had begun halfway through his lecture on comparative atmospheric chemistry. The stylus he held wobbled between his fingers, tapping erratically against the touchpad of his data pad. He tried to steady it, but his fingers betrayed him. From the second row of the amphitheater-style lecture hall aboard the interstellar exchange vessel Vorings, a student noticed. "Professor Fletcher," the student said with a voice like two stones grinding inside a glass bottle, "your appendages are vibrating uncontrollably. Is this a sign of internal combustion?" Zane paused, looked down at his hands, then up at the wide-eyed faces of his alien students. 12 species, 23 pairs of eyes, and at least 6 different biological forms of concern now fixed on him. He gave a tired laugh and tried to wave it off, which only made the shaking more obvious. No combustion," he said, his voice dry. "I drank too much coffee again." There was a silence. Then a student from the Jalari contingent, tall, translucent, and vaguely giraffe-shaped, raised a limb. "Define too much, Professor." Zane smiled weakly. 7 cups. Since sunrise." A low murmur rippled through the class. One of the Balerians, whose species relied on slow metabolic absorption of nutrients through skin pores, let out an audible wheeze. "That exceeds the toxic threshold for 13 of our species," the Jalari student said, scrolling rapidly through a shared datasheet on Earth biochemistry. "Why would you ingest a known stimulant past safe levels?" Zane sighed, lowered himself into the hover chair behind the lectern, and rubbed his eyes. "Because I had to finish grading 16 final projects, rewrite 2 research proposals, and prep this lecture," he said. "Then I realized I hadn't slept in 30 hours and the only thing that kept me upright was caffeine." The Balerian student blinked slowly. "And you consider this optimal?" "No," Zane said. "It's just what I had to do." The silence that followed wasn't judgmental, more like stunned curiosity. A few students began taking notes. He tried to continue the lecture, but his hands wouldn't stop. His stylus slipped once, bounced off the lectern, and clattered on the floor. He bent to pick it up, got halfway down, and froze. His chest felt tight. "Professor Fletcher," came a voice this time from the back. "Your epidermis is dramatically pale. Is this a circulatory warning?" Zane opened his mouth, but the words didn't come. His vision fuzzed at the edges. He tried to stand, but his legs buckled and he collapsed sideways into the hover chair, half sliding off it. The room exploded into motion. "Emergency," the Jalari student called out. "Human medical distress." A Harnex student galloped out of the room, hoofs clattering on the composite floor. The rest of the students surged forward, surrounding Zane in a careful arc, unsure whether to touch him or not. Zane heard it all like it was underwater. Elevated heart rate, sweating, tremors, possible stimulant overdose. His own voice, barely audible, "I'm fine. Just coffee." Then everything went dark. He came to in the medbay, a sterile, flickering place with a faint scent of antiseptic and ionized air. He was lying on an inclined diagnostic slab, electrodes glued to his chest and head. A faint beep tracked his heartbeat. "Zane Fletcher," said a voice from above him. He turned his head. A Sorith physician loomed nearby, its eyes like polished obsidian beads. It held a clipboard, a relic only used for human patients now because humans still liked paper. "You experienced acute caffeine toxicity," the physician said, "combined with sleep deprivation and elevated stress hormones. Your cardiovascular system was strained but has stabilized. You were lucky your students reacted swiftly." Zane licked his lips. "How long was I out?" 3 hours. He tried to sit up, but a firm appendage pressed him back gently. "You were not to move yet. We ran a full panel. Your blood pressure was dangerously high. You need rest, hydration, and a complete stimulant detox regimen." Zane groaned and covered his face with one hand. "That means no coffee." "That means no coffee," the Sorith confirmed. A soft chime echoed in the room. The door slid open and the Jalari student stepped in, followed by the Balerian and one of the smaller Zentari. The Jalari held a clipboard of its own. "Professor Fletcher," it said, "we have compiled a list of alternative stimulants with lower toxicity as well as optimized sleep cycles for your species. Additionally, we request clarification on the cultural logic behind willingly ingesting poison for productivity." Zane tilted his head back against the cushion and sighed. You're turning this into a research project, aren't you? Yes, the Jalari said. Your behavior has prompted several inquiries into human adaptability thresholds. One student hypothesized this may be a method of self-induced stress testing. It's not, Zane muttered. It's just life. The Balerian leaned closer. You are not required to perform at this level, Professor. Our curriculum allows for modular scheduling. Why do you not request aid? He didn't answer right away. Because I don't want to fall behind. Because I feel like I have to keep proving I belong here. Because I'm the only human faculty member aboard a ship of 1,300 non-human academics, and I still don't know if I was chosen because I'm good or because they needed diversity. But all he said was old habit. The next few days were slow. The medbay staff kept him under observation, and the Sorith physician checked his vitals every few hours. Zane tried to sneak a packet of instant coffee in from his quarters. The nurse confiscated it and replaced it with a bottle of electrolyte solution. On the third day, the Jalari student returned, this time with a portable scanner and a document titled Human Stress Response, a multi-species analysis. Professor, it said, we wish to conduct a controlled experiment. You will not be harmed. Zane narrowed his eyes. I'm not drinking more coffee. No. We want to simulate performance pressure under varying cognitive loads. It is our hypothesis that humans operate better under stress than many other sapient species. That's not flattering. You survived a full academic quarter without more than 5 hours of sleep per rotation. I barely survived, he said. Yet you did. Zane sat up a little straighter. His ribs still ached and his hands were steadier now, but he could feel the fatigue in his bones like wet concrete. All right, he said. One condition. What is it? You let me teach again. Slowly. 1 class per week. The Jalari considered this. Agreed. 2 weeks later, Zane stood again in the lecture hall. A thermos of herbal tea in his hand and a biometric patch on his neck that monitored his vitals in real time. The students watched him carefully, but not with pity, with a kind of reverent curiosity, as though he had become a case study in survival. He pulled up a slide on the screen behind him. It read, The Limits of Biological Efficiency, a Human Case Study. Today, he said, we're going to talk about why you shouldn't do what I did. A few students laughed. The Balerian waved a tentacle. But Professor, your actions prove that humans are capable of enduring high-stress environments. Zane nodded. Capable, yes, but not without cost. He set the thermos down. Adaptability isn't always about pushing through pain. Sometimes it's about knowing when to stop. Another student raised a hand. Then why didn't you? Zane hesitated. Because I thought if I didn't keep going, I'd disappoint everyone. That I'd prove the old stereotype that humans are too fragile, too wild, too emotional. So I pushed harder. And it almost killed me. The room was quiet. Then the Zentari student, small, green-scaled, with a voice like wind through reeds, asked, Do you think we would have thought less of you if you had asked for rest? Zane looked at them. No, he said. I think you would have understood. But I didn't give you the chance. That night, he sat alone in his quarters, sipping tea and reviewing student submissions. He felt the urge to pour a cup of coffee. The craving was still there, a ghost in his hands. Instead, he stood, stretched, and turned off the lights. Somewhere in the dark, he muttered to himself, too much coffee again. Never again. But he knew it wasn't really about the coffee. It never had been. Zane didn't notice the quiet at first. The lecture hall, usually a chaotic medley of shifting limbs, whispering translator drones, and the occasional Jalari light burst of amusement, now held an unusual stillness. No one scribbled. No one cross-referenced. The only movement came from the slow, synchronized flickering of the ceiling panels overhead. He lowered the display screen behind him. All right, he said without looking up. Who's organizing the intervention this week? A few chuckles rippled across the room. None of the students replied. Then the Balerian student raised a limb, its mottled surface rippling faintly. You have not blinked in 80 seconds. Zane blinked twice hard. Didn't realize you were counting. The Jalari, seated to the Beleriand's left, adjusted its headplate, which glinted with a faint blue sheen. We are attempting to identify early indicators of collapse. Your ocular dryness correlates with previous pre-syncope behavior. I'm not going to pass out again, Zane muttered, rubbing his eyes. I slept. I hydrated. I even ate a salad. One of the Zentari students leaned over its desk and rotated its neck a full circle. Was the salad composed entirely of starch cubes and synthetic dressing fluid? Zane hesitated. Possibly. The Jalari tapped its scanner. That meal lacks sufficient macrobalance to sustain mammalian cognition for more than 3 active hours. I'm aware. You are currently at hour 4. Zane turned off the projection and sat on the edge of the lectern. Okay, new plan. We'll skip the neural conductivity models and talk about something else. He scanned the room. Ever heard of a concept called overcommitment bias? Tentacles, pseudopods, and appendages shifted. The Beleriand's surface darkened slightly, a sign of interest. It's what happens when someone agrees to do more than they can handle because they believe they'll figure it out later. It's not a strategy. It's a delusion. The Saurus student in the back raised a flat, armored limb. Is this a continuation of the previous lesson on biological efficiency? Nope, Zane said. This is a live case study in very bad planning. A few students leaned forward. I agreed to review 6 grant proposals this week. I also volunteered to co-moderate a symposium panel on interspecies pedagogy. And I offered to mentor an internship group from the Hari Alliance. All while teaching 2 courses. The room absorbed this in silence. Then one of the students from the Charnolith cluster, whose body shimmered like heat haze, emitted a sharp, melodic click. Why? Zane exhaled through his nose. Because I thought if I said no, someone would think I wasn't trying hard enough. The Beleriand's voice was low and steady. You are the only human educator aboard. You experience cultural scrutiny. I know. Then why would you increase your burden under those conditions? Zane tilted his head. Because I thought that's what you expected. The students glanced at one another. The Jalari slowly raised its headplate again. Did you infer that expectation from our behavior? Zane paused. No. I think I brought it with me. He stood and paced slowly, hands clasped behind his back. Humans have this thing. We call it imposter syndrome. It's the feeling that no matter how well you perform, someone's going to figure out you don't belong. The Zentari's frills expanded slightly, then contracted. That would be a dysfunctional psychological pattern. Correct, Zane said. And pretty common, especially in environments where you're the only representative of your kind. The lecture hall remained hushed, but the atmosphere shifted. Not pity, not confusion, just recalibration. Then the Jalari said, we were unaware that human cognition included sustained self-doubt as a normative function. Zane gave a short laugh. Oh, it's not a feature. It's a bug. He paused at the edge of the platform. Anyway, I've decided I'm no longer trying to prove anything. I'll still do my job, but not at the cost of breathing. The Beleriand's surface brightened a few tones. You will delegate. I'll try, Zane said. It's hard when you're used to doing everything yourself. The Jalari shifted forward. We have compiled a revised schedule matrix that reduces your workload by 32%. Would you like to review it after class? Zane blinked. You made me a schedule? We made you 4. You may select your preferred model. The Zentari raised its head. We also eliminated redundant committee obligations by cross-referencing your calendar with the administration's task distribution ledger. You were listed in 3 simultaneous meetings next week. Zane stared. How did you get access to that? The Jalari tilted slightly. We requested it. The administrative AI granted observer permissions when we identified a pattern of unsustainable human task accumulation. Zane sat down hard. You've unionized on my behalf. No, the Beleriand corrected. We've optimized your existence. He rubbed his face. Is that better or worse? Statistically, the Jalari said much better. A soft chime echoed. Class time was up. As students gathered their things sacks, holoslings, nutrient dispersal packs. Zane remained seated. One by one, the aliens filed out, some nodding, others emitting respectful pheromone bursts or low-frequency acknowledgement hums. Only the Zentari lingered. "You should consume a protein-dense meal before your next obligation," it said. "I will," Zane replied. "Thanks." The Zentari paused. "Do you wish us to continue monitoring your physiological patterns?" Zane considered. "Maybe just notify me if I'm about to do something very dumb." The Zentari's eye shutters flicked in what passed for a smile. "That appears likely. We will stay vigilant." The door closed behind it. Zane sat alone for a while, watching the ceiling lights shift through their programmed dusk cycle. He felt strange. Not better exactly, just hurt. Later that cycle, he walked into the faculty lounge, a room he usually avoided because it smelled faintly of seagrass and ozone, and found the Sorith administrator, Dralvek, recalibrating the beverage array. "Fletcher," Dralvek said without turning. "Your students have submitted a bulk requisition for nutrient support and rest intervals on your behalf." Zane raised an eyebrow. "They what?" "They believe you require additional environmental accommodations. They have included a list of suggested meal items, several of which contain marshmallows." Zane groaned. "Of course they did." Dralvek turned, studying him with a gaze that gave away nothing. "Your presence here is not contingent on outpacing expectations. That is not how we evaluate contribution." "I'm starting to get that. You are permitted to be fallible." Zane nodded slowly. "I'll work on that." He turned to leave, then paused. "Do you know if the beverage machine has any non-caffeinated drinks that don't taste like boiled moss?" "There is a citrus infusion compound that mimics human orange derivatives. It is tolerable." Zane pressed the button. The machine chirped. A steaming cup emerged. He took a sip. It tasted like orange rind and regret, but not coffee. And somehow that felt like progress. The lights in lecture hall theta dimmed exactly 2 degrees. A subtle adjustment to accommodate the visual receptors of the Mavex delegation. Zane sat cross-legged on the floor, not because he was trying to make a point, but because the chair they'd provided turned out to have a lumbar configuration designed for beings with thoracic spirals. His back had given up arguing an hour ago. Across from him, 6 students arranged themselves in a loose semicircle. The Jalari, as always, had a scanning pad balanced delicately on its dorsal ridge. The Belarian hovered slightly off the floor, osmotic membranes faintly rippling in the recycled air. A pair of Zentari siblings perched atop their folded legs, silent but alert. One of the Sorith twins blinked slowly, while the other held a translation node that kept dropping signal and occasionally translated Zane's size as aggressive bird mating calls. He ignored it. "I'm not teaching today," Zane said. "We're going to do a diagnostic." The Jalari's headplate flicked upward. "Of what?" "Me." The Belarian's surface shifted to a muted green. "Are you experiencing new symptoms?" "No." "I'm trying something different. I want to know how you interpret me. No academic filter. Just as another intelligent being trying to function on a spaceship full of wildly different expectations." The Sorith twin with the node tilted its triangular head. "You wish to be evaluated informally?" "Yes. Think of it as a feedback loop." The Jalari blinked twice. "Are there parameters?" "No cruelty," Zane said. "And no lying." The students exchanged glances or equivalent signals, then settled back. The Belarian spoke first. "You misread silence as disapproval." Zane raised an eyebrow. "Go on." "When none of us responded to your high output week, we were observing. You interpreted our observation as judgment. You then adjusted behavior based on that assumption." He scoffed. "So I panicked because no one said anything." "Correct." The Jalari tapped its scanner. "You also misattribute competence to overextension. You believe adequacy is insufficient. That might be fair." The Zentari sister spoke. Her voice was soft, with a slight tremor that wasn't emotion, just her lung system adjusting to the humidity. "You do not rest when allowed. You rest only when forced." Zane winced. That's a bit on the nose. Your species appears proud of this, she added. But we do not understand the function. He rubbed the back of his neck. It doesn't have a function. It's a flaw. The Sorith twin adjusted the faulty translator. This time, it rendered the next sentence correctly. You conceal distress behind irony. We detect it anyway. Zane laughed under his breath. That's just being human. We know, the Jalari said. But you do not always know when to stop. He stared down at his hands. They weren't shaking. Not anymore. But they still bore the faint imprint of overuse, faint calluses from stylus pressure, a small scar on his thumb from opening too many sterile packages without cutters, and a spot on his wrist where the biometric patch had left a mild rash. I thought I had to represent my species, he said quietly, even if it meant exhausting myself. The Balerian's hue deepened. Your biology is not a symbol. It is a system. It cannot perform under perpetual strain. I know that now. The Jalari rotated slightly, indicating the Zentari brother who had remained silent until now. He finally spoke. We have noticed your recovery, but also your reluctance to accept help unless it is disguised as academic collaboration. Zane arched an eyebrow. You're saying I only accept support if it looks like work? Yes. That's accurate. Your students wish you to remain, the Balerian said. Not because you overperform, but because you adapt. And you admit when you err. Zane drew a long breath through his nose. You're not going to let me off easy, are you? The Jalari scanner chirped. You are not fragile, but you are not immune. We would prefer you remain functional. The Sorith twin nodded once. Alive too. Appreciated, Zane said. The lights in the room brightened slightly. Class time was technically over, but no one moved. He stood slowly, stretching his back until it popped. All right? Since we're being honest, none of you are off the hook either. You've been tracking my cortisol levels and micro-analyzing my food intake. That's not normal student behavior. The Balerian lifted a limb. You are correct. It is above the baseline. Why? We were worried, the Jalari said plainly. Zane blinked. You've got 3 doctored tracks between you. You're not supposed to be worried about me. That assumption is flawed, the Zentari sister said. We are sentient, not indifferent. He gave a slow nod. Okay, I get it now. Outside the hall, the corridor lights shifted to early evening tones. A faint chime reminded everyone it was nutrient interval. The students began to gather their belongings. No one rushed. As they trickled out, the Jalari paused at the door. We have compiled a set of rest protocols tailored to your neurochemical patterns. Would you like access? Zane smiled genuinely this time. Sure. But only if you let me add commentary. Agreed. The Balerian stopped next. We have also designed a modified chair for your spinal alignment. It is less visually objectionable than the current model. Perfect. The Zentari siblings left without further comment, but the brother gave a quick nod, the closest thing his species had to a farewell. Finally, the Sorith twin lingered. We will not issue performance metrics for your presence. That is not the purpose of this exchange. Zane tilted his head. Then what is? To coexist. He watched them leave, then turned back to the empty hall. He walked slowly toward the lectern. There, sitting beside the terminal, was a small covered dish. He opened it. Inside was a wrap nutritionally balanced, labeled with his dietary data and accompanied by a note. Not a written note, just a symbol. The Jalari symbol for mutual regard, flanked by the Balerian glyph for care and the Zentari spiral of continuity. Zane sat down. He ate slowly, chewing thoughtfully, letting the silence settle. For once, he didn't feel the need to rush. Or to justify his place. Or to plan 6 steps ahead. He was still the only human in the department. But now he wasn't doing it alone.